Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Gen V Season 2 Episode 5. It's called The Kids Are Not Alright. So spoilers for the episode as always. And once again, I think we had a pretty good episode here. It's kind of funny because this one almost felt like it was not going to be the same as last week by any means, but there was kind of like a sense of like, oh, we're going to have a similar kind of focus because we've got this a straightforward goal, which instead of a sting, it's more of a like a heist or a breakout attempt where the gang reluctantly agree to go and rescue Kate because Kate has been sent to the Elmira, right? The prison hospital that they've been kept at before. And Marie argues we should go get her, and the others are reluctant, but ultimately it's kind of nice that they are coming together to do this. If not because they care about Kate yet, and there's, debatable, especially Emma's very much the anti-Kate right now and doesn't want to help her. Ultimately, Marie's argument is, no, we should do it because it's the right thing to do, not because she necessarily deserves it or because, like, we owe her one or anything like that, just because it's the right thing to do. And, heartwarming. I like when this show and the boys have heart because it kind of, it really is a nice counterbalance to all the satire and cynicism that the shows usually have. So we spent some time setting that up and building it up, and I thought, oh, this is going to be kind of like last week where there's kind of a focus that builds up to, and it'll be fun watching all this play out. But the episode actually does a complete sort of 180. There's like a complete cut off of that once they actually get to the prison and they all get captured and put in cells, right? It's a complete subversion of what you expect halfway through the episode. And I think what makes it work and not feel cheap, and at least a lot of the reason, is because we did get an episode last week that didn't do that, right? Obviously, there was twists and there was turns and there was like developments at the end of the episode that they didn't see coming. But we got the team works together to try and pull something off episode last week. And ultimately, it failed because there was new elements at the very end. The actual mission up until that point was successful, and the episode played out that way. So this episode being cut off in the middle, if we didn't have an episode like last week just there, it might feel a little frustrating that it felt like, oh, we're getting into some fun stuff, and then they cut us off. But because we just got one like this, it actually kind of felt almost more refreshing to completely flip it up on us and be like, no, that's not what this is. And even then, we still get some breakout stuff by the end of the episode, of course. So really interesting. But I guess the big thing to talk about this episode is Cipher and what's really going on with him. Now, I believe some people actually made a guess about this last week, although I'm firmly like in this camp now. There was a couple of things in this episode, one line in particular that I think has made it click for me. I think I know what's going on with Cipher. Last week I was having the idea that, oh, is he the first person that's got superpowers that doesn't have V in his system? No, I actually think there's an explanation for that now. So the opening scene is a flashback to about a month ago when Cipher has just moved in here, and we see the routine of him taking care of his quote-unquote father. I don't think it's his father, which is why I'm saying that. But we see him taking care of the old man, and then ultimately, surprise, Sister Sage from the boys shows up, and they seem to be quite close. They're verbally sparring a little bit, but then ultimately things get quite heated and they start having sex right there in the bathroom, notably right in front of the old man who is watching. And even more notably, Sage looks over at the old man during this, as if like she's keeping him involved by watching right into his eyes. I think this is a huge hint that got my brain going about who the old man actually is. And I think there's a line later in the episode that basically, at least I think, has confirmed it for me, even though they've not outright said it yet in the show. Is that, so obviously we're dealing with a power here where Cipher can puppet other people, right? He's seeing through their eyes, so this is why he knows a lot of things. The exact scope of that is still a little unclear, but that's clearly something he's been doing all season. It's been very consistent that he keeps having information and knowing what people have been up to. But there's a line later on where when Cypher's confronting Jordan, when Jordan's locked in the cell, and Jordan's getting their confidence back a little bit because they've been shaken kind of all episode because of what happened in the fight. They feel quite weak as a result. And Jordan points out, I could feel it when you were inside me. You're in pain. You're in pain all the time. And I think that kind of made me clock what's going on here, is that I think the old man is Cipher, or the real Cipher, if that makes sense. But also Godolkin, I think, like, because the entire season started with that flashback of Godolkin running to the fire, and maybe this is what his body was like after the fire. I think they're one and the same. So real Cipher, Godolkin. Was there a Cipher before Godolkin started using him? But that I don't think so. At least not in a soup sense, because that's why Cipher doesn't have any V in his system. That's why when Marie sensed his blood and she's like, "There's no V in there," she's right. There is no V in there, because that body, the body we keep seeing, the Cipher that we're looking at, isn't the soup. He's just the meat puppet for the old man who's in the chamber. Like, I think that's what's going on here. I think he's the real villain here. He's always been the real villain, and the body that he's in is nothing. And I think Sister Sage knows this. I think Sister Sage knows exactly who she's because later on in the episode she shows up in the present day, and she's talking about how, you like, I brought you a gift and we're going to get the results we want. Don't you worry about Homelander. It feels like they're colluding to ultimately overthrow Homelander and not have to worry about his power grabs or whatever. I think this all makes sense. I think this makes sense with why there's no V in his system. It's because, yeah, this body technically is just human, but the actual suit with the powers is the old man back in the tank. So, I think that's cool. I think that's a really cool thing that they've hinted at, to the point where I think a lot of people are going to get it now based on that line of dialogue, that you're always in pain. I think the opening scene made me think of it a little bit with the way Sage was looking over at him, and then that line really kind of is where my brain all started to click together. And it also, with the ending and what eventually happens with Marie, it kind of makes sense what he maybe wants Marie to be able to do, right? That he wants Marie to ultimately either heal the old man, or maybe Marie will be a good permanent body to take over once everything's said and done. Because I think when Sage says you're running out of time, she's talking about the fact that his real body is not going to live forever. In fact, he's quite old by this point, given that the flashbacks were back in the 70s. He's an old, very ill man, very sick, injured, needs a lot of help to stay alive. He's not going to last that much longer. He needs a more permanent solution so that his core body is, he can take over any healthy young body he wants, but once his real body's gone, that's it, game over. So I think the whole idea is that Marie's eventually going to be forced to try and heal him. Yeah, and which obviously, if I had said that to myself before I watched this episode, I'd be like, but what are you talking about? Like, she can only heal blood-related things. Except, at the end of this episode, she doesn't. She goes beyond that. I mean, she heals something that is beyond just blood needing to be moved or a heart needing to be beaten. She straight up makes someone get Wolverine regeneration by the end of this episode. So, cool stuff. All of this I think is really interesting. Cipher's still a really intriguing character. I loved him popping in at the start of the episode when Marie and Jordan are like having their one-on-one in the locker room, and Jordan's really upset. Marie's trying to help, saying things like, "Oh, Cipher's wrong. He's wrong," and then Cipher just pops in and goes, "Oh no, I'm quite right," and just kind of like comes up and says, "Hey, you're going to train with me, Marie, tomorrow. Or there'll be consequences, yada yada yada." He pulls his whole shtick. It's all very, he's a very good villain. Like, I think last week it really elevated him to like a great villain. Better than we had last season, I think. I think Cypher's a better villain than we had last season. That's cool. And then ultimately, once we get into the plan of like, okay, we're going to get her, Emma's like, this could be a trap. This could, there's a lot of hesitation there. And there's some fun little character bits of like her talking to that guy, the brother character of the other girl who is flirting with her. And Jordan and Marie are just sort of standing by the car, kind of smirking because they can tell there's a flirtation happening. Also, Jordan tries to give Marie the car that they got for being first, and Marie's like, "I don't have a license," and throws the keys back. I thought as someone who doesn't drive, I thought that was quite funny. Once they get there, though, there's concrete in the chimney or whatever it was they were trying to sneak into, and Emma's like, "See, I told you it was a trap," and then quick cut to the point where I was almost like, "Is this a dream sequence? It happens so quick." But they all get locked up, and they all get the collars put on, and we got like a full glimpse of this process, because once we found out Kate, that was the final thing Cipher revealed in that earlier scene in the locker room. Kate's went to Elmira. We got the full sequence of her coming in and getting the collar on, being forced to strip down, She tries to use her powers to escape, but quite quickly they zap her with the collar. She does get a guard to tase himself in the balls with his taser. Not that that's what she actually told him to do. Her powers are still, not exactly working correctly. Later on, when she asks for a key, the guard stabs himself in the eye with the key. So things are still a bit wonky. It did include the key though, so I feel like that's closer. She's getting closer to the things being accurate. So that's something, right? We're moving in a good direction. So no, I think what I liked about some of this stuff is that I really like that Kate knows they came to rescue her, and Emma doesn't exactly deliver the news because she's in the cell across from her. She doesn't say, "Hey, we came to rescue you." Obviously, Emma's pissed. She says, "F you, we came to get you. This is the rescue." Blah blah blah. She's not exactly selling it as we were trying to do a good thing. She's just pissed, and she wasn't the one that was excited about doing it in the first place. But it actually does affect Kate. Kate does get kind of touched by the fact that they came to rescue her. And it motivates us to try and think of a way to break out, which ultimately ends up being her pulling a staple out of her head where she got patched up from the injury, and uses that to lockpick the lock and then lures in a guard. And from there, we get her escape attempt towards the end. So the big thing, though, once they're in here, right? Obviously, we talked about the Jordan exchange with Cipher, but Cipher's like, "Hey, I don't want to use you as a weapon, Marie." And Marie can't use her powers on her own blood right now because they gave her an anticoagulant. I can't say it. I can't say the word. Coagulate. I'm trying to say it without the anti first. Coagulate. I can't. Look, I don't do good with some words that have lots of L's in them, okay? That was a lot of L's in coagulate. Coagulate. Anticoagulate. I kind of nailed it. All right, I think. It was close. Anyway, anyway, her blood's no good right now. Long story short. And she can't use her powers on herself. And he basically just threatens to take over Jordan and have them die if she tries to dare use his wound. Why he's got a wound we'll get to in a second. But turns out they've got her sister. They take Marie to a cell, and there's a woman in there. She realizes who this is, and her sister. By the way, her sister's not horrified to see her. It's worth mentioning. Now, I did have the thought here at one point. Are we really 100% sure it's really her? Not so much that, I'm not saying Marie's, I'm not saying Marie's not recognizing her properly. I'm saying that we live in a world with shapeshifters and superpowers, and I'm just, I could have easily seen the eventuality that this ended up just being a shapeshifter and it wasn't really her sister all along. Now, that could still turn out to be the case, but at the same time, it's also very evil, the fact that they've kidnapped her and put her in a prison cell to try and motivate Marie to do whatever Cipher says. That's his endgame, or his goal here. And ultimately, when the whole prison escape thing happens later on, and very quickly, Marie and some of the others start to question, wait, why was this so easy? You took it out of your cells and came all the way to ours without any guards in the way. It feels like this is another test. It feels like this is something that's been orchestrated. And it kind of feels like this is maybe Sage's doing, because Sage is obviously the super smart one, right? She came in, she's working with Cipher. In fact, I think the implication might even be that the gift she brought was the sister. It was Beth Ann. So, or Annabeth, whatever way around her name is, I forget. Annabeth, it's Annabeth, not Beth Ann. So Annabeth ends up dead, right? They get to her cell and they're all shocked when she's lying there with her throat slit, and everyone's really freaking out. Marie goes into quiet mode, and Kate's crying but saying we really have to go. But Marie instead decides to focus and use her powers, and this is why I'm convinced this is completely set up, staged by the people in charge here, by Cipher, Sage. Because the whole thing he said earlier on about the fight, right, back in the locker room, he made it very clear, this whole cage fight or MMA fight was all about pushing you to use your powers in a way that are stronger than you've ever had before. It was about putting you under pressure to unlock more of your power. And Marie kind of admits that that's true, that she felt so powerful that she could have maybe just destroyed the entire arena right there in that moment. And it does beg the question, what are the limitations? But the ending here where she brings her sister back to life. Now, maybe it's not a case of she can just resurrect anyone. Perhaps it's important that her sister has just died in the last, minute or whatever it's been. She's not been there for long. We know it's not been at most like an hour, if that. Probably much sooner. Probably much more recent, I should say. So all I can think is that, one, she clearly uses some of, like, what do I call it? The life force of the other characters, because they all get nosebleeds when she starts, like, kicking her power into gear. Now, maybe this is just, like, a side effect, like a shockwave of, like, her powers hitting everyone else because she's, like, like, just doing something so big that it's impossible for it not to affect everyone in the vicinity. But I was kind of reading it in the moment as, like, she was kind of, like, I don't know, drawing in some life force or something from the others to help bring her sister back. Not enough that it permanently, I don't think it will hurt any of them long term. They're in pain in the moment. They're all holding their heads in pain. But ultimately, it heals her sister. Because I thought we were maybe going to see all the blood go back in and it would, like, heal things up. But you straight up see the wound on the neck, like, go back together, Wolverine style. And that's an interesting development, because that feels like it's going beyond just manipulating blood like it was before. It maybe suggests that she's also able to control other parts of the body, whether that, on a molecular level, whether it's, but there's something else maybe there that she's actually able to do. And her powers are going, a bit beyond just blood kinesis, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, my guess is that this is mainly about Cipher / original Godolkin wanting to keep living, right? And wanting Marie to somehow either fix him or be like possibly a new host. But I think it's more about saving the original body, and that's why the time is running down. And I think that's a cool premise. I think the premise of this season, once we got cooking, has been pretty solid. I really like all this main plot with Cipher. I like how ahead of everyone he always is. This idea that he keeps just knowing things that they've been up to. It happens in the scene with Polaris, where he's like, I know you've been looking around in the archives. What have you found out? Like, the way he kind of just challenges people with stuff that he shouldn't know has been quite entertaining and has made him feel quite formidable before we even get to the superpower where he's very dangerous physically to them. And then not to mention the power he wields as his position, where he can throw people in cells and he can, go find people's sisters and all that. So I think that stuff is great. I'm really liking the central group of characters quite a bit this season as well. I like this idea of, like, can we trust Kate? Should we put our neck out for her as well, even though she kind of betrayed us before? But Kate seems to want some kind of forgiveness and redemption, so there's kind of a heart to, like, that developing as well. So it's really nice seeing the characters all pulled together at the end of the episode. I loved Emma's reaction to finding out that Marie's sister's here, because she hadn't heard that yet, and she just starts dropping F-bombs. Like, that's entertaining, and no one argues we should go get her. No one says we don't have time for that. It would have been a really tough thing to argue as well, to be fair, but, like, I like that there's not even a hint of, oh, that'll make this riskier trying to get out. Like, there's no question. It's only once she's already dead that Kate suggests maybe we should go. And it's not an evil thing to say, because she's dead. Like, she's already dead. We might as well save ourselves. She doesn't know that Marie's going to be able to magically bring her back from the edge. Now, is it possible this is not the real sister and some shapeshifter because we're in the boys universe? That is possible. That said, though, I completely believe that they would do this, that they would put her real sister in this position and kill her to further motivate her, just like the fight did earlier on, but even further. Like, the idea that Marie, everything she's been about since the start of season 1 is about finding her sister, and this idea that she's been disconnected from her because of what happened to her parents, and she's finally found her, technically, and she's already dead. Like, that is, like, the most, like, raw emotional motivation that they could have given her for anything. And it's unlocked something new. To the point where I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if the start of the next episode, Cipher walks out and says, that's exactly what I was hoping for, you can all go back to campus. I mean, I'm not saying that I definitely think that's what's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me. I don't necessarily think we're spending the last 3 episodes all in Elmira. I mean, I could be wrong, but it feels like that's not really what the end goal is here. At the very least, it feels like maybe Marie will agree to train with them, but they all get to go back. That's perhaps a likely possibility. But I think what I liked about a lot of this main plot in this episode is that it was fun with what it was initially doing and was good character stuff with them wanting to save Kate. And then when it pivoted, it was a nice circumventing my expectations in a way that didn't feel cheap, in a way that felt like, oh, we're kind of shaking things up because, again, Cipher, as he's always been, is 1 or 5 or 10 steps ahead of them. But then everything we got once they were in cells, between the sister, between the conversation between Jordan and Cipher, between like just Kate feeling like, oh, they came to save me, like I'm going to help them as best I can now. I'm going to like risk myself to try and save them because they did this for me. All that stuff I really liked. And it sounds like I'm building up to a but, like a negative, and I'm not really. I mean, I kind of am, but not in a way that any of that's like undone. Like, I really liked most of this episode. That all that stuff was great. I'm loving the main plot this season, especially these last couple of episodes where I think it's been kind of firing on all cylinders and has been very, very compelling. And also the fact that Sage is like working with them and is like, hey, we're going to get everything we want, and she's like, don't worry about Homelander, makes me think, yeah, the reason why she's been so gung-ho last season in The Boys about helping Homelander and co is because she does have an end game in mind. In fact, one of the things that I kept saying last season in The Boys was that it feels like she must have her own goal in mind, otherwise she wouldn't be helping these assholes, because it doesn't seem like she would want to. I think all that's good. I think all that's great even. So, minor critique, right? Or minor thing that I wasn't super as hot on. In general, I think Sam's plot this episode, and indeed, to be honest, the season, like he's kind of been my weakest character for this season. And he wasn't in last episode, so I was kind of alright with him not being there. This episode, he goes back to his parents who are shocked to see him. And they do like a mix of things here with the heart-to-heart with the dad, him getting angry because he thinks the mum's calling Vought and crushing the phone, and he pushes the dad back, possibly hurting him. And then he has a heart-to-heart with the mum when she comes out and talks to him about what he's going through. There's also a tease, of course, that he might get involved in the main plot when Emma calls him to say, hey, come and be better than her and help us break her out, because there's going to be a big metal door that we might need some help with. And he says no. And to be fair, this conversation I think actually is really nice for Emma, because when he says no, you were right, Emma, Kate is awful and she deserves it. Emma's like, yeah, but we can be better than her, so let's go do it anyway. Like I thought that was a good moment for Emma, especially since she was the one who was like arguing against helping Kate for a lot of that earlier conversation. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the ultimate revelation with this plotline, which is, you know, Sam's convinced that his mental problems are all because of the Compound V, and he's blaming his parents for it. But the mother reveals that his uncle, who, you know, disappeared when they were kids, actually had his own mental health issues, and even went into a store with a gun. The police got him before he could do any real damage, but he's been mentally ill for a long time, and it may just be something in his genetics. Like, he was always going to be like this, regardless of the superpowers that he has from Compound V. The Compound V, you know, maybe you could argue that it's enhanced them, it's sped them up, or it's made things worse, but there was a good chance that what he has outside of the powers was always going to be there in some form. And, you know, him and his mum share a bit of a moment over that. I mean, he's got a joke at the end where he's like, you know, this is where I saw my first vagina, and she's like, thanks for that. I thought that was a funny response to that line. It just wasn't as exciting as the rest of the main plot. And I think Sam's story, right, and his going through issues, it's definitely had its moments, like in season 1 and stuff like that. But I will say that because it has been relatively separate to everything else, I don't know if Sam is compelling enough on his own to carry just a plot by himself. I think that's maybe the big thing I'm feeling with some of this, is that every time it cut to Sam, except this time he was talking to Emma, because that was also involving Emma, I was thinking, oh, can we get back to the rest of the characters? Can we get back to the main plot? Like, I was really kind of missing that every time we cut to Sam's plot. So it's not like it's terrible or anything. It's not like it's doing anything particularly egregiously bad. It's just not as compelling with him on his own, even though I do kind of like the ultimate like reveal of what the plot is. But I think, you know, once he gets integrated more with the other characters, I think it will benefit him and the show by doing so. But that's that. Polaris has the whole big scene with Cipher as well, which I kind of touched on a little bit, but just to mention that when Cipher starts talking about Andre and about how he was doing experiments on him, and the reason why he died is because his weak body couldn't take it. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was the gist of it. Polaris tries, picks up the knife with his powers and holds it at his neck, and Cipher dares him to do it, but Cipher ends up grabbing it and stabbing his own hand in kind of some power play style thing, which might even further suggest that he's not too particular about harming the body that he's in. If Cypher's actually the old man, then this body isn't that meaningful to him. He can just start using another one. So he's happy to stab him, which also made me laugh that when they get food, because the scene starts with like the assistant delivering their food. Polaris gets like a steak and something, right? Like a meal, like a normal meal. Cipher gets like some kind of healthy shake or something. Like that's all he gets. And I kind of, because I was already thinking about like him not really being the real person, right? Him just being a meat puppet in the same way he's controlling other characters. And I was thinking that if this is his permanent meat puppet, at least for the time being, he would want that meat puppet to be healthy as best as physically he can. So he's not letting the meat puppet. And it's not like he's in control anyway, so it's not like he's doing it to himself in a way, but this idea that he won't let himself, as the meat puppet, enjoy food that's less than ideally healthy. That said, though, on that subject, Jordan did say, when they were talking about being controlled by Cipher, that they were in there, in the back seat, and could see and feel everything that he was doing whilst in control, but just couldn't do anything about it, and that's why they felt so powerless. That does suggest then that there is a real person in this body, which I won't call Cipher, because again, I think Cipher's... I mean, maybe... I don't think Cipher belongs to this body necessarily. I mean, I feel like Godolkin took over this body, took the name Cipher at that point, because then he started presenting himself as a soup at some point. But, I mean, they could tell me a bunch of things about the backstory there and like how that happened. But... it does suggest there is a real person that this body belongs to who's actually trapped in there and is watching everything he's doing, is seeing all the bad things that he's doing. And assuming it's not, it's a decent human being in there, someone who's not a complete piece of shit, probably doesn't feel very good about all the things that Cipher does with that body. And it also just further shows how, think about how Jordan felt after being controlled for like a minute, right? Imagine the person inside Cipher's body who is being used to do horrific things. Their body's been used in sex against their will, right? Sage is having sex with Cipher early in the episode. The person in there is seeing and experiencing that, but has no say in it. So that's pretty messed up when you actually stop and think about that side of it. And I think it's a very important detail that they had Jordan describe what this experience of being controlled by him felt like. So, again, great villain. Good stuff. I'm excited to see where they go with this in the last 3 episodes of the season. Yeah, the season's going really quick because there's only 8 episodes. Don't get me wrong, there used to be some padding when we had 22 episode shows for a lot of things. But, there's maybe a middle ground where 8's maybe just a little too tight in some ways. Admittedly, if they write for 8 episodes, it should feel fine. But, it just... I do miss the days of like a nice, long, meaty, good season of TV. But anyway... that'll wrap up my thoughts on this episode of Gen V. Of course, you can tell me what you thought of the episode in the comments, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Support the channel over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or indeed via YouTube membership. Thanks to everyone who already supports us. And yeah, I guess that's me. I said all that in one breath. I don't know why. I could have taken a break in the middle of that somewhere, but thanks very much. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?